Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our Nasuni webinar today. So we're joined here by Andy Hardy from Nasuni, who will be presenting the webinar for you, and we also have John Garidis from Byte Software Services.
Yes, good morning everyone. I just want to give a brief overview about Byte. We're started in 1982, so we're over 30 years old, and we look it. We are the #1 Microsoft UK licensing vendor and #4 in Europe. Some highlights: we have a large training team and over 50 strong team in the SAM part of the organization. But what is more significant is that we are in fact the #1 cloud provider for Microsoft in the UK, with over 20% share for Office 365 and over 40% share of Azure. And the reason that this is important to customers is that because we are able to leverage our position to get better deals for you and introduce you to new development and new technologies such as Nasuni to help you with your products and your future. So as part of what we do, we also work with IBM and Citrix as well as other vendors, and we have a large solutions and implementation team. Moving over to the next slide, what we're doing now with Nasuni, we established the partnership early this year, and we are running a number of joint proof of concepts. The reason we decided to join and work very closely with Nasuni is primarily because when we meet the different CFOs in large organizations and CIOs, they quite often ask their IT team what is the reason of stopping them from moving more data into the cloud and using the cloud generally more. And one of the things we find is that one of the objections or concerns is security as well as performance. And we are able to address those concerns. So that's partly the reason we're working with Nasuni, because they are one of the largest leading NAS solution providers in the world. So without any further ado, I'll pass you over to Andy. Andy?
Okay, thanks John, and good morning everyone. My name is Andy Hardy. I'm Vice President at Nasuni EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and I'm based here in London. Despite my silly Australian accent, I have lived here half my life. Nasuni is the world's leading cloud NAS solution, based on leading global cloud storage platform Microsoft Azure. We provide an alternative to traditional on-premise NAS file storage by replacing, for example, things like NetApp and EMC Isilon and other traditional filers. And reducing your costs by as much as 60% by moving file data storage to the cloud, but without sacrificing security or performance. Many corporations worldwide use us. We have over 8 petabytes stored with us, and we've done over 2.8 billion file restores to date. File data, unstructured data as it's also known, grows rapidly, as we all know, something like over 60% annually according to Gartner. And as your workforce has become increasingly distributed and mobile, infrastructure becomes more costly and difficult to manage. So the most common issues we hear from customers are, for example, scalability. How are you going to handle the growth in a more granular and infinitely scalable way? Expanding traditional NAS filers is, as we all know, expensive and disruptive. Filers also go end of life. We literally throw them in a skip after 3 or 4 years and then have to reinvest. Migrating data to a new filer is expensive and time-consuming and somewhat disruptive to your business. Data protection is also a challenge. This file growth is straining your already unreliable and expensive backup solutions, taking them past their breaking points in some instances, resulting in missed RPOs and RTOs, recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives, and making disaster recovery even harder for people. Mobile access is also a challenge because these files increasingly need to be accessed and shared with consistent performance, whether the user is at headquarters, in a remote office, at an airport, or on their phone or tablet. Do these issues sound familiar to you? Are you seeing unchecked growth as one of your key challenges? A lot of our customers are. And let's take a look at how this looks in terms of the complexity of these solutions today. In today's typical infrastructure, you have your storage pools. Customers have to protect them by backing them up, usually making multiple copies of data across Tier 1 storage, and a myriad of other technologies and software, including replication for DR, for example. So how do you guys do this today? What backup software do you use? Do you use tape? Well, where's your disaster recovery? And this gets more complicated when you start to add in remote locations. They need to be connected to the data center and to each other, all of which requires hardware and software that needs to be implemented, monitored, and managed. And the data at remote locations also needs to be protected, exacerbating the backup issues we already discussed. And we haven't yet even looked at connecting the users to the data and the data to the users. Users are demanding consistent access to files from any location, and latency from remote locations is no longer tolerable. And they need a way to share files in a manner that's consistent with your IT security and business policies. Gartner, for example, predicts that by 2018, 50% of enterprise data will reside external to the data center. And just look at how that complexity grows as we add more and more sites. As if it wasn't hard enough, most companies look like this with multiplying sites and remote locations. So here at Nasuni, and by working with Bytes and Azure, we have a radical solution that can address these issues. Nasuni Cloud NAS with Microsoft Azure together provide an efficient and effective alternative to on-premise NAS. Nasuni Cloud NAS provides performance as fast as a local filer with cache disk capacity on site. Data is then compressed, deduplicated, and encrypted by our technology before being sent to the cloud. This provides you with infinite scalability, limitless capacity. You only pay for what you use, but you can expand as often and as readily as you like. It provides you with much better protection of your data. We build in unlimited snapshots, so backups included, and we also address security challenges. Data is encrypted before it leaves your premises, so you can and you keep the encryption keys on your premises. We do this through a global file system which distributes data across multiple sites. You may have offices in New York, London, Paris, and Munich. Our service makes it appear as if everyone is on the same filer locally with our global file locking implementation, and we also provide mobile access to all your users for the same data as well. Nasuni supports file workloads at any level of performance in any location and on any device. By eliminating silos, increasing performance, and providing centralized management, we deliver a couple of things that every IT organization really needs, I believe, and that's simplicity and control. Users don't see any difference. It looks just like your standard file share. The migration is seamless, and Nasuni will help with most of that work. And the gold copy of the data is stored in the cloud, and therefore we have multiple copies for disaster recovery purposes taken care of automatically without paying for additional replication software. By leveraging the cloud, we're thus able to provide greater simplicity, lower cost, and full data protection, while also delivering the ubiquity of file sharing anywhere in the world. So as I mentioned, Nasuni Cloud NAS delivers unlimited scalability. Capacity scales in the cloud on demand. There are no limits on the number of files or directories. It gives you high-performance NAS at the edge on your premises, and in all-inclusive incremental capacity-based licensing. You pay per terabyte per year just for the terabytes that you need, not for a bunch of empty space that used to reside in your filers. It also provides you with built-in data protection. Infinite file snapshots enable you to replace backup. Immediate file restores are thus possible for users. We also build in geo-redundancy by working with Microsoft Azure, and that gives you integrated disaster recovery with 3 or more copies of your data stored in the cloud. Nasuni Cloud NAS is also accessible anywhere. It's truly a global file system with global file locking, as I mentioned previously. You can access the data from any location, any device, perhaps branch offices where you can put our virtual filers, or even in small branch offices, just give people our mobile or desktop client to access and cache files locally. All of this is centrally managed and gives you absolute control of a global file system. Our security model is ideally suited to those of us here in Europe with data privacy concerns. And obviously, as we've seen the demise of Safe Harbor, people are increasingly concerned that their data is going to end up in third parties' hands that they may not wish it to. Data is encrypted before it leaves your premises, in transit, and at rest in the cloud. You as the customer keep the encryption keys that are used to generate the encryption of the data. Those keys are kept on your premises, so therefore by definition the data has been deregulated effectively before it leaves your premises and cannot be accessed by any third parties, be that Microsoft or anyone else. Nasuni filers join customers' Active Directory domains for users and groups and access control, so it is truly part of your security infrastructure. And Microsoft and others, as I mentioned, can't access the data. Only you and your staff are able to do that. Our technology takes care of the key distribution globally across your sites quite automatically and transparency. So this all leads to a number of, I think, quite valuable business benefits of moving files to cloud NAS storage. You can reduce costs and improve your total cost of ownership with a very predictable cost model, paying only for the terabytes you need. We do have an online TCO calculator, which I'll provide you with some details of in a moment. It lets you adapt to organizational scale requirements, but without the disruption that usually goes with expanding your traditional filers. It happens all online and seamlessly. It lets you consolidate silos of unstructured data from all across your organization and all of your remote offices and sites. We enable you to integrate acquisitions and office transitions much more quickly and easily, and you never again have to purchase or migrate storage infrastructure as you traditionally have to year in and year out with the traditional on-premise model of yesterday. This lets you streamline a number of IT operations, for example, scaling instantly on demand, eliminating backup pain, dealing with disaster recovery in only minutes, and managing all this with a single pane of glass. We have over 200 customers in 40 countries across many different vertical markets, including here in the UK, for example, customers such as IMG, the International Sports Media Group here in London, a very large global media business, and Scott Brownrigg, a global architecture, engineering, and construction firm. With over 8 petabytes of client data stored, as I mentioned, we have, we think, a very proven model, and we're adding hundreds of terabytes weekly to our capacity. Some other customers here in Europe, for example, Hogarth, part of the WPP group, they have over 3,000 locations globally in 110 locations. They've deployed Nasuni filers, Nasuni Cloud NAS, at 9 locations globally, and they've moved over 250 terabytes to cloud storage, and people in all of those global locations are able to access those files with our mobile access solutions. Imagination, another world-leading London-based media agency, they have over 30 terabytes of Azure storage. They've replaced their NetApp storage increasingly with Nasuni Cloud NAS by migrating files to our environment. And global companies in architecture, engineering, and construction, such as Perkins and Wills, have replaced NetApp with over 100 terabytes of storage. Now, you can start with just 5 or 10 terabytes, by the way, but as you can see from some of these numbers, the solution scales infinitely. So to wrap up, Nasuni enables customers to reduce their file storage total cost of ownership quite significantly by as much as 60-65%. We replace all of the following technologies with one centrally managed solution in the cloud. We replace your primary NAS. You never need to buy new storage and migrate again. We let you separate your backup infrastructure because you don't need to have a separate backup infrastructure. We take care of that directly for file backup in the solution itself. So all the servers, media, and offsite storage that you otherwise have to invest in, all of those costs go away. You don't need separate file sync and share solutions to enable your people to get access to file data that's stored in your filers. And you don't need separate remote site storage and replication because that is taken care of in the cloud. So DR becomes something very simple for file access, and WAN optimization is also built into our solutions as well. With a simple per terabyte capacity software as a service license model, you pay just for what you need and you expand as you grow. There are no additional license fees. All features and support are included, and that includes the unlimited snapshots that I mentioned earlier. There is an online TCO tool you might like to take a look at just by going to nasuni.com/TCO. Apologies to everyone online who's working in sterling and euros. This works in dollars, but you can do the maths on that easily enough yourselves. So the next steps that we would suggest, I just remind you that Nasuni has helped hundreds of customers to manage file sprawl and replace their tier 1 storage while eliminating backup solutions and improving their RPO and RTO and access all around the world. We'd love to suggest that you'd register for a free live demo with one of our staff and an assessment of your cloud NAS storage requirements in your environment. There's a link there which we'll also send to you in the email, www.nasuni.com bytes_webcast.html. I don't know why the 6 is in there, but I'm told by my marketing people that it is necessary. So I'm going to hand you back to Amy now. We have had a few questions come in online. Thank you very much for your time and attention this morning. I'll just give you back to Amy and we'll see what questions we have.
Okay, thanks Andy, thanks for that. Okay, so I'm just going to read some questions out. So if you do have any more questions, there is a questions box, so just at the right hand side of your screen. Just pop them in there and we'll answer those for you shortly. Okay, so the first question I have here says, how do I know my data in the cloud cannot be accessed by third parties, ideally US federal government?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. That's a concern that many people have. Let's just review the regulatory environment that we're struggling with at the moment. Obviously, data protection laws here in Europe are a lot more stringent than they are in the US, and US cloud corporations are required by US law under the USA Patriot Act to share data with the US federal government if they're asked to do so. And that cuts against the requirements of European data privacy regulations. We used to rely on the safe harbor laws under which US corporations would promise to abide by European data privacy laws. However, a European Court of Justice ruling last November has made those laws invalid, which has led to a lot of concern on this. We address that issue by enabling customers to encrypt the data before it leaves the device. You keep the encryption keys, so unless you provide those encryption keys to any third party or authority that would ask you to do so, then no one else is able to access that data. I hope that answers your question. I think there's another question there just now, Amy. I can't quite read it from where I'm sitting.
Okay, yep, so the question here, so this says, how does deduplication work? Does it deduplicate files?
Yeah, great question, and one which my technical colleague Dave Ranson would go into in a little bit more detail. He leads our SE team here in Europe, and he'd be happy to set up a live demo and answer your technical questions, or we'll address it through the email. In a nutshell, yeah, it's file level deduplication, and it's the content of those files. We chunk it all down, and we identify the duplicates across your file system, and we tokenize those. I can't go into much more depth myself. I hope that's a good enough answer from a salesman, but we'll get into a bit more detail with you another time. Thank you very much for that question, Michael. I think there's a couple more questions there. In fact, I think I can read them from here. I can see the next question is, how do we go about expanding our terabyte capacity without disruption? It's really simple. You can just literally grow without limit. When you go over the terabyte limit that we've contracted with you, we'll let you know about that. You might decide that you've put something on there inadvertently. You can just take the capacity off, and there'll be no penalty for that. Otherwise, we'll agree with you to invoice you for the expanded amount of terabyte capacity. Amy, I think there's one more question here. Have I got time to take that? Okay. The next question is, what limitation is there? And thank you, Jenny, for this question. What limitation is there on the number of snapshots? We don't have any limitation on the number of snapshots, so our customers are able to retain data for as long as their retention policies require. It's also very granular. You can govern both the RPO and the RTO time intervals that you keep snapshots for. And Henrik has asked a question here as well. Benchmarking on-site NetApp versus remote NetApp versus Steelhead versus Nasuni solution. Right, that's a great question. So we will deliver the same performance as the equivalent on-site hardware from another vendor. Let me explain that in a bit more detail. We do provide some technology which goes on-site. And that technology can be either in the form of an appliance, which you can buy from us. There are different sized appliances with different amounts of CPU, memory, and disk that we would size for you. But also a lot of our customers choose just to use existing virtual server hardware that they already have, and we'll provide our virtual filer software free of charge, because we're really only interested in charging you for the terabyte capacity of the service. So we'll let you run that software for free on Microsoft Hyper-V or on VMware, and we'll give you some spec guidelines for that hardware. So obviously the performance, as with any on-site hardware, depends on the number of users, the number of transactions, the number of simultaneously open files, etc. So we'll spec the hardware, and for an equivalent, NetApp box, for example, we'll deliver the equivalent performance. And as far as the Steelhead goes, we've built in our own WAN optimization, which is optimized for file distribution. And so the only additional piece of latency that comes into the equation then has to do with how we handle global file locking. And we do that in a very particular way, which overcomes the traditional problem because if you think about it, we have to have all the metadata somehow shared between users in different offices. That might be an office in Sydney and an office in London, for example, so that we can implement a global file locking solution. And we do that centrally through a cloud service. We don't have to replicate all the metadata between different sites, and that means that we can do that blisteringly fast. So there's always going to be some latency with global file access, but we keep that to an absolute minimum. Local file performance will be just like the NAS that we replaced, and on top we enable global collaboration in a way which would otherwise not be possible. And frankly, we do all that at a lot less cost than the infrastructure you're asking about there, Henrik. If you think about it, when you buy your NetApp box and your Steelhead, you've got to pay for both of those things. Your NetApp box, you've probably bought a lot more disk than you're actually using because of the overheads that are inherent in those solutions, and also because of the fact that you need to buy so much capacity that you're going to grow into over time because of the capital investment you need to make with those solutions. With Nasuni, especially if you take our virtual filers, you don't need to make any capital investment at all. You just pay for the terabytes that you use, and so your costs are a lot lower for an equivalent solution. I hope that makes some kind of sense. I'll just pause now and see if there's any other questions. And I'm very pleased to see so many questions coming in this morning. But we are almost out of time. And with that, I'll hand back to Amy. Just give me a moment.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks, Andy. So thanks everyone for joining the webinar today, and thank you so much, John, for being here, and also Andy for presenting. So as mentioned previously, if you would like some more information, if you could please just pop that in the feedback form, and we will follow up with you as soon as possible. So thanks everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.